Britain's 1980s lorry drivers lived through a nightmare. 90-hour weeks, deadly fatigue, and a sharp rise in fatal crashes. Most slept under 5 hours a night, and almost half broke the law just to finish their routes. But these statistics hide something even more disturbing about the industry and what drivers were forced to endure. This is the untold story of how brutal life was for a British trucker in the 1980s. The Transport Act 1968 established maximum driving hours for British truck drivers. Regulations permitted 10 hours of driving per day, extendable to 11 hours twice weekly. Drivers could work 15 hours total per day, including non-driving tasks. Weekly driving limits stood at 60 hours maximum. Rest periods required 11 consecutive hours daily. These legal frameworks existed, but enforcement remained inconsistent throughout the 1980s. Tachograph devices recorded driver hours, vehicle speed, and rest periods. The European Economic Community mandated tachograph installation in commercial vehicles exceeding 3.5 tonnes in 1981. British haulage companies complied with varying degrees of cooperation. Some operators openly encouraged drivers to manipulate tachograph charts. Methods included using two separate charts, inserting cardboard to prevent proper recording, or claiming mechanical failures. The Road Transport Industry Training Board reported that approximately 40% of tachograph inspections in 1984 revealed irregularities or deliberate falsification. Traffic commissioners conducted roadside checks on commercial vehicles. In 1985, the Department of Transport performed 127,000 roadside inspections. Officials found violations in 31% of cases examined. Penalties for tachograph violations range from $200 to $2,000, with potential loss of operator licences for serious breaches. However, prosecution rates remained low. The National Audit Office determined that fewer than 8% of detected violations resulted in formal prosecution during the mid-1980s. Average weekly earnings for British truck drivers stood at $158 in 1985, according to the New Earnings Survey published by the Department of Employment. This figure placed driver earnings approximately 12% below the national average wage for male workers. Long-distance international drivers earned slightly more, averaging $175 weekly. Owner-operators faced different financial calculations, with fuel costs, maintenance and insurance consuming significant portions of revenue. The Road Haulage Association documented a 17% decline in freight rates between 1980 and 1983 after adjusting for inflation. Deregulation of the road haulage industry following the Transport Act 1980 intensified competition. The number of licensed haulage operators increased from 89,000 in 1980 to 126,000 by 1987. This proliferation of operators drove prices downward. Companies compensated by reducing costs, primarily through driver wages and vehicle maintenance budgets. Payment structures often included complex piece rate systems. Many companies paid drivers per mile or per delivery, rather than hourly wages. A 1986 study by the Transport and General Workers Union found that 43% of long-distance drivers received some form of performance-based compensation. This system incentivized excessive speed and hour violations. Drivers who refused to exceed legal limits faced reduced earnings or termination. Britain operated approximately 240 designated lorry parks in 1985. The Road Haulage Association calculated that this provided one parking space for every 12 commercial vehicles on UK roads. Most facilities offered minimal amenities. A 1984 survey by Transport magazine evaluated 150 lorry parks across England and Wales. Inspectors rated only 18% as having adequate toilet facilities. 47% lacked any washing facilities whatsoever. Cafe facilities at lorry parks varied considerably in quality and hygiene standards. The British Insurance Association reported that cargo theft from parked lorries increased by 78% between 1980 and 1989. Criminals targeted high-value loads including electronics, cigarettes and alcohol. Drivers sleeping in cabs faced personal safety risks. Police statistics recorded 340 assaults on lorry drivers at roadside locations in 1987 alone. Many incidents went unreported due to fears of employer retaliation or police indifference. Most British trucks in the 1980s featured basic day cabs with minimal sleeping accommodations. Continental-style sleeper cabs with dedicated rest compartments remained relatively uncommon in UK fleets until the latter part of the decade. Drivers using day cabs slept across seats or in cramped spaces behind the driver's position. A 1985 industry survey found that 61% of British long-distance drivers regularly slept in vehicles lacking proper sleeping facilities. Heating systems in lorries relied on engine operation or auxiliary diesel heaters. Many drivers ran engines overnight to maintain cabin temperatures, consuming fuel and creating noise pollution at parking facilities. Winter temperatures inside unheated cabs frequently dropped below freezing. The Transport and General Workers Union documented cases of drivers suffering hypothermia after sleeping in unheated vehicles during winter months. Cooking facilities consisted primarily of portable camping stoves using methylated spirits or gas cartridges. Drivers prepared basic meals in cabs to reduce expenses. Lack of refrigeration limited food storage options. The Dover-Calais ferry route handled approximately 850,000 truck movements in 1985. Delays at Dover averaged 4 hours during peak periods. Summer months saw queues extending over 2 miles from the port entrance. Drivers waited in their cabs without adequate facilities. The Port of Dover provided minimal amenities for waiting drivers. Toilet facilities consisted of 4 portable units serving thousands of drivers weekly. Ferry crossing times range from 75 to 90 minutes on conventional vessels. Drivers remained in or near their vehicles during crossings. Onboard facilities for truck drivers consisted of basic seating areas separate from tourist accommodations. Food and beverage options cost significantly more than equivalent items on land. A cup of tea on 1985 ferry crossings typically cost 0.85 compared to 0.40 at roadside cafes. Continental European routes presented additional challenges. French motorway toll costs added significantly to journey expenses. The A26 motorway from Calais to Reims imposed tolls totaling approximately $28 for heavy goods vehicles in 1985. Italian and Spanish routes featured mountainous terrain requiring greater fuel consumption and increasing mechanical stress. Alpine passes closed periodically due to weather, forcing lengthy detours. British trucks entering continental Europe faced customs inspections at multiple points. The TIR convention facilitated some streamlining, but procedures remained time-consuming. Drivers required extensive documentation, including CMR consignment notes, customs declarations, and vehicle registration papers. Dover Customs Processing handled approximately 2.3 million commercial vehicle inspections annually during the mid-1980s. Random physical inspections occurred in approximately 15% of cases. Full cargo examinations added 2 to 6 hours to journey times. The Transport and General Workers Union represented the majority of employed truck drivers in Britain during the 1980s. Membership peaked at approximately 140,000 drivers in 1980 before declining to 98,000 by 1989. Union influence diminished following legislative changes under Conservative governments. The Employment Act 1980 and subsequent legislation restricted secondary picketing and required union ballots before strikes. Major industrial actions included the 1979 transport workers' strike, which preceded the 1980s but influenced subsequent labour relations. The strike lasted 11 weeks and involved demands for wage increases. Owner-operators possessed no collective representation equivalent to traditional unions. The Road Haulage Association primarily represented company interests rather than individual drivers. The Freight Transport Association similarly focused on operator concerns. Self-employed drivers negotiated contracts individually, often accepting unfavourable terms due to competitive pressures. A 1988 study published in the British Medical Journal examined health outcomes among professional truck drivers. Researchers found cardiovascular disease rates 32% higher than national averages for similar age groups. Contributing factors included sedentary work, irregular meal patterns, and chronic sleep deprivation. Obesity rates among drivers exceeded general population figures by 28%. Musculoskeletal problems affected large portions of the driver population. The Health and Safety Executive reported that 41% of truck drivers experienced chronic back pain. Vehicle vibration, poor seating design, and manual handling of cargo all contributed. Workers' compensation claims for back injuries among transport workers increased by 67% between 1980 and 1987. Mental health issues received minimal attention during this period. However, evidence suggested high rates of depression and anxiety among long-distance drivers. The British Insurance Association estimated cargo theft losses at $150 million annually by 1987. Electronics, cigarettes, alcohol, and designer clothing represented primary targets. Organised criminal networks operated sophisticated theft operations. Techniques included following loaded vehicles from distribution centres, disabling drivers through violence or threats, and transferring cargo to waiting vehicles. The M1 and M6 motorway corridors experienced particularly high theft rates. A 1986 police report identified 15 organised gangs operating along these routes. Detection and prosecution rates remained low, with fewer than 12% of cargo thefts, resulting in arrests. Insurance premiums for high-value loads increased substantially, adding cost to haulage operations. Drivers face personal danger during theft incidents. The Police Federation documented 12 cases of serious assault on drivers during robbery attempts in 1985 alone. Several incidents resulted in permanent injuries. Companies provided minimal security training or protective equipment. Drivers relied primarily on parking in groups and maintaining vigilance. The Department of Transport employed approximately 280 vehicle examiners conducting roadside inspections in 1985. This workforce inspected approximately 0.8% of heavy goods vehicle journeys annually. Limited resources prevented comprehensive enforcement. Many violations went undetected due to insufficient inspection coverage. Speeding prosecutions for truck drivers increased during the 1980s, following installation of speed cameras on major routes. The national speed limit for goods vehicles over 7.5 tonnes stood at 60 mph on motorways and 50 mph on single carriageway roads. Police statistics indicated that approximately 23% of trucks exceeded these limits during spot checks in 1987. Drink driving regulations applied equally to commercial and private drivers. The legal blood alcohol limit stood at 80 milligrams per 100 millilitres. Random breath testing became more common during the decade. Conviction rates for drink driving among truck drivers remained proportionally lower than private motorists, though this reflected detection rates rather than actual compliance.